Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 483, Repulsion, directed by Roman Polanski, 1965. Now, before I go on with this, I should address the elephant in the room when it comes to Polanski, and that is why he's not in the United States. Because there's a lot to this, but I want to try to be as succinct as possible with it. I think what he did was inexcusable. Both the act itself and also fleeing the way that he did. I understand that there were apologies made and that the whole matter should be dropped, but really, I think that in a nutshell, either it needs to be formally dropped in the courts, or he needs to answer before the court and then let the punishment carry out. I don't think that the court of public opinion is either to string him by the neck or to exonerate him is the proper court. So that's really how I take it, is that this should be a matter that's addressed with the courts, not with the rest of us on either side. And finally, I try very hard to separate that out from his directing abilities, because let's face it, he knows where to point the camera. He knows how to deal with actors. He certainly was proven as a master of psychological horror, and this film is in that category. And he's also proven himself to be fairly well in other types of films. The most recent film I've seen of his is the Ghostwriter. And I thought it was pretty good, and actually, I think it's because of Polanski it made it a little bit better. Otherwise, it probably would have been just it probably would have been very subpar. But at any rate, so I try to. So I'm not somebody that is not interested in his work because of what he did, because of what he did. But at the same time, it can affect my judgments of it. So I try to look at him as the filmmaker, not as that other thing. And yes, I also know everything that has happened to him, including what happened to his parents in Poland, and also what happened with his first wife, Sharon Tate. But it still doesn't excuse what he did. It's often used as a kind of blanket, but it still doesn't excuse the fact. But anyways, that's all I'm going to say about that for now, because I don't want to turn this any longer than it is. So, Repulsion. This was Polanski's first off. This was his first film that he made outside of Poland, considering that the film he made prior to this was Knife in the Water, and that was his first feature-length film. But this is the first film he made outside of Poland. In this case, it would be the UK, and thus this will also be his first English-language film. He would make two others before he would then go on to the United States to then make Rosemary's Baby. The film itself, in so many words, this is something where I don't want to reveal a whole lot of what's going on, because part of it is kind of going along for the ride. But the ride you're about to partake, if you watch Repulsion, is a Belgian woman who lives in London with her older sister and works as a manicurist, and played by Catherine Deneuve. And I think this was the film that made her into a breakout star, or there might have been something before that. But anyways, this is an important role for her and her career. But anyways, lives in London with her older sister as a manicurist, and is shown to have some little neuroses that were pretty mild and minor. It does revolve around sex. You know, she finds, like, she hears her sister loudly making love to her boyfriend, and is sickened by it, and also feels ill at ease with any kind of advancements that are made. But then over the course of the film, there are circumstances and situations where she unravels. That relatively calmer facade starts to crack, and it gets more and more. It gets more and more demented, and this is what Polanski is best known for: is capturing that so well. Giving it both a certain realism, but also at the same time a surrealism, using a lot of dreamlike imagery. You have apartments that come apart, and you have things showing up, and also the use of wide-angle lenses, which was a sort of a signature of the films that he would be best known for, to again make it a very subjective experience. So it's definitely a staple of psychological horror, and there's plenty of other films that owe a lot to Repulsion. In fact, the first time I saw Black Swan, I came out of it and I looked at it and I said that this is a summation of The Red Shoes, Repulsion, and Videodrome, just in terms of what was used and what kind of ideas were explored. And apparently there's also elements of Repulsion in Pi as well, speaking of Darren Aronofsky. But, it's interesting in that this is a film that is often used as a reference, particularly when you're dealing with psychological horror. But at the same time, it's also a film that owes something to films of the past. You have traces of Buñuel, you have traces of Cocteau, you also have traces of Henri-Georges Clouzot, particularly Les Diaboliques, and finally you get Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho in there. And it's just this interesting amalgamation of various images and various ideas that all work to show the state of her mind, going from somewhat normal, odd, but still functional, into gradually she starts to unravel and devolve into just into full-blown breakdown. By the end of it, it's she goes into full breakdown mode. I won't tell you exactly how she gets to that state, but there is this downward progression that goes on, and it's really fascinating to watch in terms of the images and also the way that it plays out, because it plays out fairly normally, but then as you get more into her head, it gets a little bit more psychotic. And so, if you want to get into Polanski, this is a good film to get into. That and Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown, as far as I would consider classic Polanski. The films that came after he had to flee the United States and remains in Europe is kind of, I don't know. It's, some films are probably worth seeing. I haven't seen The Pianist, and I don't know if I probably would want to, but I'm not entirely sure how I would feel about it. I did see The Ghostwriter, and I thought that was pretty good. But for me personally, given what I said earlier, I think I would rather stick with the films that he made prior to. Basically stop at Chinatown and maybe go into The Tenant, because that's that's considered part of what he called his apartment trilogy. And Repulsion is, in this case, Repulsion is supposed to be the first one of this. This is more of a retroactive trilogy that he thought of. It wasn't deliberately constructed as such. This is more after the fact. But Repulsion is in this, and Rosemary's Baby is in it, and then finally The Tenant. So that's another trademark of Polanski is showcasing, really getting the sense of a claustrophobic, constrictive space and what that does to one's psyche. So if you're interested in that, it'll definitely be up your alley. And I would say that this is kind of the beginning of this current trend that Criterion seems to be doing, is that they seem to be getting a lot of more recognizable titles, whereas again, this is kind of the other advantage of doing it in spine number order. The other titles are, with a few spots here and there, they're mostly titles that you would only hear about if you are really into world cinema or if you're really into particular niches. But here you start to see a lot more recognizable titles, and this is going to be the case as we go further on. So yeah. Repulsion. And until next time, take care.